Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 17. I am with CatZ here, which I want to say he's one of the newest additions to like the A team, the varsity team of casting, but he's actually been around for quite some time, casting like many things over the past 10 years of StarCraft II. And I believe your history actually starts before StarCraft II, correct? You were actually a big Brood War fan.
Yeah, I would say so. I wasn't a Brood War caster, but yeah, I was a player, I suppose.
Yeah, right. So, what age did you start playing Brood War? And like how serious was it?
I started at some point in middle school, I want to say, probably when I was like, I want to say 15, yeah, something like that, or like just shortly after or when Brood War was released, or shortly after Vanilla, StarCraft Vanilla. I'm not sure at this point, but it was a very long time ago. Yeah.
Well, Vanilla would have released in 1998, and then Brood War released 6 months after, but still in 1998. So I'm not sure what the months are, but not sure if that helps you.
Yeah, then it might have been, yeah, after Brood War release, or yeah, it was early on.
Yeah, but I mean, still, you were there from kind of the beginning. I mean, we talk a lot about some of the really prolific casters, the old guys, the guys who went to the Brood War Christmas bash thingy, right? And how much they were involved in StarCraft before StarCraft 2 was a thing, before esports was really, really big. But there were like a number of people, I guess, like you, right, that actually were still involved too. So we usually think of like Artosis and Tasteless, Day 9, and his, the famous kind of like pseudo documentary video that's out there. And you were actually kind of like a part of that process, but I sometimes like have it's hard to understand where exactly the skill level was when it came to non-Korean Brood War, right? Because we didn't really have leaks and we had no way of really telling. So it basically comes down to you guys and your honest truth about how good you were in Brood War. So, I mean, we were talking about like, were you like part of a clan? Were you a team captain at any point? I mean, what were you?
Okay, that's a good question. So Day 9, Tasteless, Artosis, In Control, all of these guys would have been participating in the WCG circuit in the US. And WCG was basically the biggest tournament for each country. So I participated in the Peruvian WCG instead. Peru was very strong through and through in StarCraft and Brood War. So I would usually get something like top 8 in Peru comfortably. Maybe I got a top 4, but nothing more than that as far as one versus one. But my main gig in Brood War was actually two versus two, and two versus two, which was much bigger, much more um, well respected, I suppose. Where there was actually a two versus two scene, and there were players who were good at 2v2, and you couldn't put two very good one versus one players and expect them to be the two versus two team ever, pretty much. So that's kind of what I specialized in. And in that, I thought I was pretty good. Um, as far as like the non-Korean scene, I think I was one of the better 2v2s. Druby was my longest standing partner, and he was better than me. And he kind of carried most games because my job as a Zerg was kind of just to survive as long as possible while he macros.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, it was weird. It was cool. 2v2 in Brood War is awesome. Um, so I would play all the nation wars, for example, sometimes one versus one, but primarily two versus two. So there was a scene outside of Korea where I would interact with Tasos and Artosis and In Control and all of these guys. Now who was good? I think Sean Day 9 was probably the best out of everyone.
Hmm.
But everyone kind of had their peaks. Um, In Control was actually one of the first people to notice me as a player back then. Because back then the only way to gather recognition was to get noticed by someone else, and you would do that by them either watching you or replays popping up. So he saw me play some Koreans and thought that was cool. So he was one of the first people to bring me up as a player back then. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So then once someone notices you, then everyone kind of starts like remembering your name. And you
Yeah.
were cats back then. You were root cats back then.
Not root. Yeah. I was pretty much. I made like so many teams in US East. There was US East and US West, and US East was the equivalent to NA, and US West was more like EU. There was EU as well, but most of the good North American players would have to train on US West, which was mostly Koreans. So US East was kind of the running joke back then, and there was Clan X17, which people would gather at, and that was where all the decent to good players of US East would gather. And I was always trying to make a team that was good enough in US East to compete with the likes of X17 or In Controls 88 or something of the sort. But then I transitioned to Europe, which is where most of the competitive non-Korean scene happened. Eventually Europe saw teams involved like MTW or MYM, brands that would go on to be larger or already have an established brand in some way, shape, or form back then. So that was pretty cool. And in EU, I was co-leader / leader at certain points of IG, which was one of the best European teams, and we had a couple Koreans too. Yeah, that was me.
When you said that US West was like, because you were facing Koreans, was that because they were on the Korean server because they lived in the West, or were Koreans actually playing on the US West server?
They were playing on the US West server. I'm not sure why. Yeah. No, I would. Yeah, I never asked, but it was mostly Koreans. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I
Yeah.
wonder if there's some like technical aspect to that. But anyways,
Yeah.
okay, so that's kind of funny. There was kind of that like divide, more so than there certainly is in StarCraft 2, among North America, anyways, right? It's North America and there's Europe. Yeah, so you became, I guess, prolific might be the right word, but it sounds like you were there for a very long time. You did a lot of things in Brood War. Obviously, you were still a growing boy, so you didn't have, like a wife and kids and all that stuff, right? So as you grew older, though, I mean, what age were you when StarCraft 2 came out?
I was going to school in Florida when StarCraft 2 came out. So I must have been like 23, 24 at this point, 24. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Um, yeah.
So you went to college, right?
Yeah, I went to school for architecture in Peru for 3 years. Then I didn't like it, and then I went to media arts and animation in the U.S. and I got a bachelor's in that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's what I remembered. So you go through like a lot of the years though of Brood War, playing at a somewhat competitive level for I guess the non-Korean scene. So that was a huge chunk of your life. I mean, was there any point where you actually took a step back to focus on your studies, or was it actually just kind of playing throughout the entirety of StarCraft?
No, at some point towards the end of Brood War, see, I'm from Peru, obviously. So, in Peru, the way that internet culture developed was through PC cafes, and that's how I was introduced first to StarCraft. So I played it online with my best friends and their uncle, and then they all became too shitty for me. So we would play different games instead. But some of those games would have been Counter Strike Source or whatever it was called, the start. Um, and then Dota 1, which was when Warcraft came out, when Warcraft 3 came out, then and Dota 1 became a thing. That was what we would mostly play at PC cafes, and then um, over the last years of Brood War, I primarily played Dota 1. So for the last for the first 6 or 7 years, I played Brood War, and then I played Dota 1 for a couple of years or so.
Okay, so it wasn't just like all hardcore into Brood War, leading up basically to StarCraft 2, which is perhaps why a lot of the other guys who went from Brood War to StarCraft 2 are, some of the biggest names in StarCraft 2 because they were there jumping on board basically immediately, right from being a pro in Brood War or close to it, anyways. So for you, StarCraft 2 comes out. I mean, did it just kind of like rekindle an old flame, or was it a gradual, like, I guess I'll pick it up, whatever?
Oh no, I had dreamed of StarCraft 2 so much, right, at that point. So Drury and I, years before they announced StarCraft 2, when we were playing StarCraft 1, because we were playing for so long, we had already decided that we wanted to make the best team in North America when StarCraft 2 came out, maybe like 5 years in advance. And I made logos for that team, which is a different logo than what we have now and a different name. And we were serious about it. So the team's name was We Serious. But then there was another team that was called We Serious that emerged at some point. So they kind of stole our thunder in that sense, and we had to search for another name. And yeah, we came up with Root. But no, it was always kind of a plan of sorts. One of the very few plans that I've ever made.
Well, I mean, you're still around, so it seems like a pretty good plan. So you guys made this team. I mean, that's kind of amazing that that was like your goal. Because you usually hear, you usually hear that, oh, I wanted to be a pro first for like a lot of people, and then like kind of how much they really stick to that is a question mark. But or like directly into casting, I want to be a caster. But you started off wanting to be like at least a team captain slash team owner, because I'm guessing back then this was still the wild west of esports where
Yeah, there's no ownership is nothing,
yeah.
right? Yeah, ownership and nothing.
Exactly. So captain and owner kind of were like a hand-to-hand thing, and there wasn't a whole lot of like business deals or contracts to be made up. It was all
No,
kind
there
of
there
like
was no money expectations. It was just like, let's, I want to make the best group of friends to play with each other and improve with each other, and that was the goal.
yeah, exactly. But you in the process became, I mean, a pro player, as with your team. So how did that work out? I mean, you obviously were doing more 1v1 because the 2v2 scene didn't ever really exist for StarCraft II.
It
Uh,
did. Yeah, it did
okay,
for a
so
short
for
while. Yeah.
how long and what type of tournaments are we talking about?
So beta comes around and rolls out. In control, the people that would become EG, LC Gamer, Machine, Kelby Inca, all of these guys that were still in media, and Greg, of course, they were all in media. And like you were saying, like they were pretty much the most established North American group in Brood War. So EG just picked them up when StarCraft II came out. So Alex Garfield clearly saw an opportunity that the rest of us didn't even know would exist at that point in time to try and make it into a prolific business and whatnot. And then say they got the beta right away. They probably had all the connections, and then Druby and I got our hands on the beta like 2 weeks later, and all we did was play 2v2. And at that point, LC Gamer and In Control were like the top 2v2ers on the ladder. And yeah, eventually, like shortly thereafter, Drury and I started beating them, and we even got accused of stream cheating because we were beating them too much. That was a proud moment for me. And then yeah, things transpired. Then the EG started organizing tournaments, and the first one was the EG Team League. The EG Team League then tried to include teams like Team Liquid, Root, Dignitas, and try to make something akin to what, like a miniature version of what Overwatch League would become, where you have like the teams involved, and not so much because the idea without the huge umbrella, I guess EG would have taken on a bigger chunk in some way, shape, or form, but they wanted to build a joint product that everyone benefited from, but it didn't work out. And at that point, the EG Team League, I think, ran for a couple of seasons or 3 seasons or something. I don't remember exactly. And the format was very similar to Warcraft 3 formats that had like something like 3 1 versus 1s, 1 2 versus 2, and an ace if needed. And in Clan Wars, I mean, proud to say again, because this is one of the scores that I've kept. As far as I remember, we were something like 6-2 against EG in Clan Wars overall. And our recipe for the most part against most teams was Kiwikaki wins his 1 versus 1 always, pretty much. Drury and I always win the 2 versus 2, and then Kiwikaki wins the ace. And like the other guys were also pretty good, so we didn't need to rely on that formula, but that's what it felt like a lot of the time. Because Drew and I went like undefeated for like 2 seasons in 2v2, and then EG recruited Axlav and Strife Bro, who were the other 2v2 team that could actually beat us because putting 1 versus 1ers didn't work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how long did that last?
I don't remember. I want to say 2 or 3 seasons for the EG Team League. Difficult to remember.
Was
at
that be
this
like a
point.
year? I'm not sure what the
Yeah, something
seasons would
like
have
that.
been.
Something like that. This is all. It's all blurry, but it's all as Twitch is coming up, or rather as Justin TV is in the transition to becoming Twitch. So with the hand of StarCraft and yeah, I mean, yeah, I was also one of the first streamers, but that was also not a business, not a thing, not a you
Right.
didn't want to be a streamer, you just wanted to stream.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing. Like, I feel like you were involved in a lot of the starts to a lot of stuff. I mean, after talking about 2v2, you're talking about being there to see the development of what would later become, one of the biggest teams, and now in general is a humongous team, EG in general. But you're also there for the streaming, and I remember that I feel like I remember you talking a lot about the basically the future of esports and StarCraft 2, whenever you would actually come on these talk shows. And I remember kind of at the time, like I came in kind of where like you were expected to stream, but yeah, it wasn't really seen as like a must. Justin TV was still a thing when I came in, and slowly turned over to Twitch. But EG seemed to kind of like identify that it would be a good thing to do, so they forced a lot of their players to start streaming. But a lot of times even without webcams, like webcams became
Oh,
a
webcams were frowned
standard.
upon. I was one of the first
Yeah,
people to wear a webcam, and people were like, "What the fuck? Why do you have a webcam?" You're like, "You're ugly." It's like, "Oh, fuck off." Like like I think it's relatable. Like I had to explain myself whenever I had my webcam on because yeah. But then
yeah,
I got more viewers than other people, so then people just started getting webcams too.
yeah,
Megumix Bear is who I
exactly.
copied. Like the first person that I saw with a webcam was Megumix Bear.
Oh my
She
gosh,
had a
yes,
webcam, yeah.
that is an old name, but yeah. Um,
But men
so yeah,
didn't have it, yeah.
well, I remember that period, yeah. Especially because, I mean, a lot of the stuff that StarCraft 2 people were getting involved in was the competitive side. That did go kind of hand in hand. There wasn't a, I mean, obviously at one point, eventually everyone jumped on board the live streaming, and there was tons of casuals. But it's kind of just like, well, if you're not a good player, then why are you streaming? Why are you even showing us? And if you are a good player, then why bother having your camera on? We
Hmm.
just want to watch you play the game. So yeah, it was a very different culture back then.
Yeah,
But you, as I was saying,
exactly.
like, you kind of, I don't want to say that you were the the um
I would say
ingenuity
Megumix Bear
guy.
was the trailblazer as far as cameras.
There you go.
But like
Yeah.
when it came down to males, I was definitely one of the first ones to be like, hey, like like I'm gonna turn on my camera because I want to relate to my audience, and I guess I saw the potential of there being at that point something like 200, 300 viewers, right? And I'd be like, well, this is pretty cool, like I want to talk to them, I want to interact with them. And to your point, yeah, like most streamers were just players, but then you have strong personalities like In Control or Destiny who, will instinctively just do more. If they turn on their stream, they will be entertainers by nature, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And like many of them also did, like Destiny did, despite who he is now and his situation now, like
Hmm.
at the time, did actually do a lot of things to kind of push forward in general StarCraft and esports. I mean, there's the infamous Destiny rants on ooh, it's been a long time. I haven't thought about the name of the show in a while. I made want
Yeah,
to
a
say
lot
the
of those
Pylon
are
show, and I was like, that's not right.
non-quotable.
Well, anyways, the show with DJ Wheat, not live on 3, but the other one. Anyways, the
I know which one you're talking about,
yeah,
the
exactly, and I
yellow
can't
one.
think of it.
uh,
I watch it so religiously too. But regardless,
not state of the game, but
yeah,
crap,
right, like
it's a yellow background, right?
yes,
Okay.
exactly.
I know what you're talking about.
Oh, good. Gosh darn it. But anyways, he came on there, and that was the kind of infamous rant about StarCraft 2 needing to catch up basically with the rest of esports that were coming. So
With a
yeah.
high five in the background. In
Yeah.
Control and Idra. Yeah, I was on Camp Destiny. Yeah, I was. Yeah, I was enemies with AG, and I'm friends with Destiny at that point.
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of like back then I also remember there being a lot more ooh, how to say it? Like, I mean, StarCraft 2 right now has some of like the older players, and there's a lot more maturity. Of course, there's still stupid Reddit threads and there's
Hmm.
drama, but it just felt like back then, especially since it was the esport to talk about, everyone who was in the competitive gaming kind of flocked to StarCraft 2, even if they were coming from CS:GO or CS 1.6, I guess, because that was the thing for a time,
Yeah,
even as their esport.
All my Dota friends played StarCraft, and then when
There you
Dota
go.
2 came out, they all became Dota pros, basically. So it was kind of weird because yeah, we all went from I met kind of all my friends from Brood War and all my friends from Dota 1 in the same place, which was StarCraft 2, and then when Dota 2 came out, the Dota 1 guys left to become Dota 2 pros.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
they branched out. Yeah, exactly. Um, but anyways, like this was the place to be, right? So it kind of felt like StarCraft 2 was on top of the world, and then everyone basically was catching up without us really realizing it. I mean, there's other things that happened. Lord Infestor did not help our cause and whatever, but yeah. But no, like hindsight. history is actually kind of kind to Destiny's rant, even though at the time, yeah, he was kind of made fun of. But I was saying that back then it kind of felt like there was more drama. There was more like tabloid shit happening where it felt like you had to keep track of like streamer battles that was all entirely into StarCraft
It
2.
was great. Yeah.
Nowadays it's like, all across Twitch you can follow these things. But back then it was just like just StarCraft 2. So I remember kind of like this guy CatZ kind of getting like the EG guys, and I was a big EG fan because I really liked watching Idra and Control was great. And I was like, yeah, that guy CatZ. I mean, is he just is he an asshole? Like, what's his deal? Because all I would ever hear is the side of EG. But that kind of happened like it felt like everywhere. But that's kind of an aside, not really super important to my point. I just found it fascinating that we started off almost like, as I was saying, like tabloid fodder was actually I remember a decent amount being there, and now it's like no one really cares
Yeah, a lot
that
of it
much.
was taking sides, right? And essentially, you had news outlets, and one of them was the EG show that you're talking about, where it's an echo chamber, right, of the ideas that they have, like that DJ Weed has, that Pain User, Idra, and In Control have. So it becomes an echo chamber. And then when Destiny joins in, he shares a lot of the same views as me in terms of what we should do for the game, right? But In Control and Idra insisted on that, grassroots and something about like Blizzard. We don't need Blizzard to get involved. Whereas Destiny and I were more for Blizzard to get involved and adapt and change things and give us the shit that people wanted. And what happened, I think what happened was League and Dota 2 kind of come in with better economic models that are so sustainable over time, and they do listen to all the feedback that was given in StarCraft 2 and all the lessons that weren't being applied to StarCraft 2, because Blizzard is used to boxed models that you ship the game and it's done. So we weren't getting all the things that we needed in an environment that was exploding and that begged for features and for explosion from the parent company, right? And we only saw that when Tim Morton came, I think, for Legacy of the Void, that we started implementing a lot of the things that we needed and skins and the war chest and a lot of shit that at that point we were years behind. And so I even started on Twitter, for example, a hashtag when Heart of the Swarm was going to come out that was called hashtag Save HOTS. And that was pretty controversial because it's kind of like the origin, or to some degree it's like kind of like saying dead game almost, right? It's not
Yeah.
it's a negative thing to say because it implies that HOTS needed saving. But I thought the gravity of the situation called for Blizzard's involvement more than we got it. So
Yeah. And again, like I think history kind of agrees with you. I'd say that HOTS was kind of the dark ages of StarCraft 2. At the time, it was still a lot of very, passionate supporters of StarCraft 2, a decent amount still obviously in a live game. But there was always that air of like, oh God, like what is next? Everyone's passing us. And okay, maybe this isn't the greatest game. And okay, we kind of deserve to fall behind as an esport. And that was also when like Pro League was at its worst. It was
oh yeah,
that full year
we
where
can
like no
hope.
one
Yeah.
was showing up the audience. Anyways, it was kind of the dark ages. And then yeah, we've kind of had a renaissance and are doing pretty well now. But yeah, definitely like making a mistake looking back in time. By that time I wasn't really a caster, but I was doing I was involved in a team, had the whole aspirations to go pro thing. And I do remember very clearly having that the dark weight of just kind of like this cloud of uncertainty.
Yeah.
And that like yeah, we kind of deserved
There were too many mistakes being done, and
yeah.
like League, for example, right away they implemented in their system region lock because it fucking makes sense. Like if you want to grow the game, right? And League doesn't even have a culture that's dominant like StarCraft 1 did. So like when NASL was announced, something like in 2011, 2012, there's an interview on YouTube of me talking to Ask Joshi, and this is a tournament of NASL that allowed for Koreans to play from Korea into the NASL, which was called the North American Star League, and basically have access to the largest prize pools on this side of the world as well as theirs. And it just didn't match with the numbers. Like the audience in Korea didn't give a fuck about StarCraft 2. The audience outside of Korea gave a lot of shits about StarCraft 2. So it just didn't make sense to not promote regional local growth. And that's something that I advocated from the start, and somewhere that I think Blizzard fucked up over and over and over again until they learned their lesson. But yeah, like that was I mean, yeah, I was doing a lot of politics, I guess, like StarCraft politics, and I failed at all of it. But But yeah, time has been kind to my ideas.
Yeah, it has. I think that does sum it up. Like, you were controversial at the time, even though
Hmm.
you know did a good job trying to explain yourself and never just come off as like a dick. Your opinions were basically could very easily be seen as being um
Yeah, it seems
dickish.
like racist. Like, yeah, why would you like why don't you want them see like or like if they're the better players, right? Like that argument, like if they're the better players, they should win everything. And it's like, yeah, sure, like I agree with that, but it's not a fair game. It's not a fair start because they have all the infrastructure. They have had access to, they had team houses, they had the culture. Even it's like just more accepting in Korea. It's more at that point, like at that point in the airport, if I ever said like, "What are you doing?" I'm gonna go play a game, like in the US, as I enter, they're like, "What the fuck?" Like, and they'll like, no one will know what it's about. Whereas now, being a professional gamer is a thing, But back then, there were a lot of stigmas that we had to swim up against, and just the overarching culture, and Korea being stronger server wise as well because all the players are stronger there, and it just didn't make sense to not region lock from my perspective, and yeah, and I think that was part of what hurt StarCraft was also the not just the uncertainty but the inconsistency of the systems implemented, right? Because we had like the country based system, which was pretty awesome, right? In 2011-12, I think, when Blizzard first involved themselves because they recognized, like, look at the space, we don't want KESPA to happen again where they take control of our product, right? So they involved themselves heavily into an environment that was otherwise growing organically. And then they said, okay, let's do national competition. Great. Then the next year they changed it, and then they opened the floodgates where everyone could play from Korea into NA, and so on and so forth. Yeah, and eventually I wrote also an article, region lock. I don't know if it's available anywhere, but it was like a 10-page article on that gathered perspectives from all the players on or all the more prolific players in the West, and I tried to explain as best as I could in over 10 pages why I thought region lock was a necessity. And then there was one of the earlier StarCraft summits. This was discussed where David Kim and two people, I don't remember who they were, the balance team at that point basically sat up front of the auditorium. You've been in that auditorium, same auditorium, at Blizzard campus, and they were talking about these things, and it seemed as though as if none of them had given my article a read because they were just not, so I kept I kept raising my hand, and they'd be like, in an audience of like 40 influencers or so, kept raising my hand. They're like, yeah, CatZ would be David Kim. I'd be like, hey, did you guys read my article by chance? And David Kim would be something like, um yeah, so what we're discussing right now is this and that, and yeah, I think you bring forward very good points, and then they would dismiss it, and then a little bit later they'd ask another question, and I'd be like, hey, did you guys read my article by chance? And I just became that person that as soon as I lifted my hand, people would laugh, and I made my point clear, and he said, "Oh, we got a summary, but I didn't read the whole of it. I'll read it, And then after that meeting, because my article was about region lock, after that meeting, Mike Morhaime approached me outside, and he said, "I promise you, we're not gonna make any changes to the system until I've read your article." And I was like, "Wow, you're God."
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. But that is Mike Morhaime. So
yeah,
that's awesome. The there's like so many things that like we could have a podcast on just like the history and politics of StarCraft, which would be very interesting. But try and veer, I guess, more towards casting. At some point, you actually became you were hired by Blizzard to do a couple of different things. So clearly, they didn't hold any ill will towards you
mm,
for these controversial statements or um, I guess nagging that you did at the
yeah.
summits.
Uh,
They actually respected you quite a bit to hire you. So I don't think
well,
that was ever a
that was in
problem.
the era of Tim Morton, who wanted to do all the things that I had been proposing. So it was different leadership at that point that hired me. But it was through Amy Morhaime that they hired me, and that was after I applied to a job leading esports, which was an ambitious application, but But I thought I met the requirements. I thought the interview went really well. I was disappointed I didn't get the gig, and then Amy said, "Hey, let's talk. Let's talk about it." And we talked, and she offered me a few different options in terms of positions that she thought I would feel well. Like she wanted me to go fight Kespa, for example. But I don't speak Korean, so I was like, yeah, I don't speak Korean, so I can't fight Kespa. That was before Kespa, just bounced, and then she offered me a couple of alternatives to go in and help here. And then one of those happened, and then that contract got renewed like 3 times or 4 times over the course of like a few years.
And I mean, that's pretty cool to learn that you were held so favorably that they actually reached out to you to try and get you not just work, but they actually wanted your input on things. I mean, that's pretty cool. But you've had many hats in StarCraft. It's kind of what it sounds like. You've been a pro, you've been a streamer, you've been a team captain and an owner as Rat or God as Rats, no, as Root got bigger.
Rats was the other, yeah. Rats
Yeah,
was
exactly. Root and CatZ
shadow.
does shorten to Rats, but Rats is definitely something very different.
Yeah, Rats is my shadow self. Yeah.
Yeah. As Root got bigger. And then I remember at some point you did start doing a couple of casting gigs. I don't remember your first one, but I remember one of the first ones I saw you in was some of the RedBull stuff back when they were doing StarCraft. So what was your first time casting and why did you get the gig?
My first time as an analyst was the first time that I remember an analyst in StarCraft II, because there wasn't an analyst programmed for the event. And it wasn't an analyst in cast. It was like post-game analyst. And what happened was I'd gone to the MLG offices in New York to just hang out with my friends because they were playing. Ruby and DRG, I think, had both qualified. And DRG was my mentor of sorts back then, my Sabu. So I'd gone there, and at that point, I was like, I'm here basically. So if you guys need anything, if you guys, if you want commentary or analysis or something, like I could add to it. And then that's the first time that I became involved in a broadcast, was as an analyst for one of those very early MLGs. Yeah, and yeah.
Are we talking about we're talking about the MLGs that happened in studio in New York, or are we talking about an actual
No, not it wasn't an event it wasn't an open event. Yeah. It was a studio where there was like 60 players or something in there. I don't know. It seemed kind of crammed when I think back to it.
Yeah. Well, I think for the listeners here, this is a very small part of StarCraft 2's overall history, but at one point MLG actually even tried a payment system, kind of like what you would expect from like a UFC, where you would pay to see these. I think in high quality, you could maybe check in at like 360, which was basically impossible. But you would pay like $15 a month or something. I forget. At the time, I had extra cash because I was living at home. So I did pay, which is what I remember. And it had some really cool stuff. I mean, it had like a pretty good finals, like Violet and Pulp, I think back when that was like a very historic matchup. And anyways, it happened entirely in that studio. Yeah, so we're not talking necessarily about you up there with DJ Wheat and Day 9 or Tastosis at an MLG Raleigh. We're talking about an in-studio thing that happened kind of towards the end of MLG's career as well, and in StarCraft, that is, because they've done other stuff. But anyways, so do you remember what year that was? Would that have been like 2013 or 14?
It was at the start of Complexity, as at the start of whenever I joined Complexity, and DRG was like the best player in the world.
Yeah,
but I don't know when that was.
Yeah,
I can probably look it up.
It's too muddled for me.
I think I had the interview on the Empire State with Hotbit then. That was a good interview.
All right, yeah. Maybe it wasn't towards the end of MLG, because the
2012.
last MLG,
2012.
yeah, the last MLG happened in 2014, which is Anaheim, and that was like the only MLG they had that year. So
yeah, this was early 2012.
Okay, my timeline's off. So, anyways, it was their other way of trying to make money and monetize esports, which is clearly a big question mark still even today. So, anyways, you came in as an analyst, and the reason I was nodding so much when I heard that was because that is a job that hadn't been implemented, and then at a couple of different events, it was. They brought on you as the analyst, or they brought on Todd as a specific analyst. They even like Grubby was initially brought on as like specifically an analyst. But we've kind of like done away with that system. Actually, we kind of did it for a little while, and then went back to not doing it so much. So, but yeah, you literally would come in, right, and just like have your own little segment, like
Yeah,
analysis with cats, right?
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, so that gave you some like I guess experience being on a broadcast, even if you weren't doing the whole,
the
you
casting
know,
itself. Yeah.
yeah, the intro and the hype and whatever. But you were still getting some experience, which is pretty important. So when you got that kind of out of the blue, kind of just coincidentally you were there and you offered, did that open any pathways to more casting gigs?
I don't think so, not directly, but the space was growing enough that there was always like room to do my own stuff. So like I did, like I was often enough in calls with Destiny or later Jeff and people on my team, generally speaking. So I had a lot of speaking experience, and we would host our own events, and then I would do some casting, but it wasn't yeah, it wasn't like professional casting, I would say. It was just kind of chilling.
Yeah, which many of us started off with. But it can be funny how you can go from like something kind of professional to back to just, chilling
Mhm.
at home studio,
Yeah.
non-studio stuff. Which is kind of what I did too. Like one of my first casting gigs, quote unquote, very quote unquote, is actually, yeah, Axel and Axlav invited me up to the MLG studios that you're talking about to help them do the B stream cast of IEM New York.
Hmm.
Oh God, I can only hope the VOD has been deleted. I'm I'm not proud of it, but anyways, and then that was just my one little like moments, and then went back to at home casting for years afterwards. But eventually you did get hired with Red Bull. Now do you remember what event that was or what year that was?
um I don't remember. I do remember it was Red Bull, and I wore my white suit.
Yeah.
And there was a Reddit thread on when you have to cast at 12 but get your wedding at 1 or some shit. It was pretty good.
Yeah.
Um yeah, I don't remember. It must have
Mm.
been, I don't know, 2013. It all blurs together. And then there was MLG Anaheim at some point at 2014. I know that one
Oh,
because I
did you
just
do that
looked it
one?
up. Yeah, I casted the Scarlet versus DRG when Scarlet
Oh,
off raced.
really?
Yeah, I casted that one with A9.
Oh man, I don't remember that at all. I don't remember any of the casters who did that. I was there though, watching from the
Yeah,
stands.
super exciting. Yeah. Um,
Yeah. Oh, it's sick. I didn't know that.
mhm.
Um. Okay, so the Red Bull thing. I remember the Red Bull thing was the one where they came up with like the live system, but then everyone kind of abused it.
Mm,
Or like they just picked one person. I think it
yeah,
was Nina.
yeah, it was Nina back then. Yeah.
They just were like, we're all gonna take the hit points away from her.
She
But
did good though. Yeah,
yeah,
I
no,
remember she held
she
on.
did
Yeah.
went above and beyond, even with everyone trying to snipe her,
Hmm.
which is
Yeah,
impressive.
that was cool.
Um, but it was like an interesting because Red Bull was always trying to do interesting formats, and they also they were one of the companies that was reaching out to different talent as the rest of the companies kind of got set in with the talent that they wanted. And this was also back when there was like so many events that there was like maybe more opportunities to divvy up than what eventually became literally four stops a year, which really cut the potential a lot. So, anyways, you did that, and then you got into MLG Anaheim apparently, which I just totally didn't know. Did you do any prep work? Did you talk to any other casters beforehand? I mean, what was that
Mm.
experience like?
So for MLG Anaheim, at that point, I am already kind of a jack of all trades in StarCraft. And I have root, and we have a solid fan base, and we can run events. And my stream gets like at that point like 3,000, between 3,000 and 5,000 viewers every time I turn it on. And Destiny gets like something like between 7 and 10,000 viewers every time he turns it on. Um, so MLG reached out to me when they wanted in the process of them building their own platform, their MLG streaming platform, that was to be a Twitch competitor, I guess. And they asked whether I would run the qualifiers for the next MLG. But I said I can't run them on your thing, but I can run them on Twitch. They were down with that. I brought in Destiny, um, and then we ran qualifiers under Game On, which was like a company that we made for this, and it was the MLG Game On well, we had an invitational also, but there were like some qualifiers, if I recall correctly, or something leading up to MLG Anaheim, and that was kind of part of the deal. It's like, you guys do this, and then you get to cast. But then Destiny didn't show up for a few dates, and they lost touch with him, and he didn't end up doing the cast. But they did get me for the cast, and yeah, that was kind of fucked up actually. And yeah, that was pretty much how I got the gig.
So a little bit of like trade, like you do this for us and we'll do this for you.
Yeah. And Twitch was
which
not
was
happy also, because Twitch had just endured owned 3D, owned.
Oh,
You
yeah,
remember owned?
yeah.
So Destiny had swapped at some point to owned, for example, before owned died.
Oh, yeah.
Because they offered him like $20,000 or something, and then they wanted also root, but we declined really fast, so we stayed with Twitch. Twitch appreciated that, and they kind of sponsored us, up until recently for something like 7-8 years in a row. So there was a lot of love and loyalty between root and Twitch, because we kind of helped, I think, bring about Twitch. And I personally had a lot of connections in Twitch, where I would actively give feedback and like talk to at that point the COO was Kevin Lin. Like, he was a good friend. I haven't talked to him in years at this point. But at some point we ran those qualifiers, and then the problem was the conflict between Twitch and MLG. So when I asked Twitch if it was okay to do these qualifiers for MLG, they were like, "Oh, we can basically match the money if you want to just run them through Twitch instead. Like, we can give you like X amount of budget for you to run something different, like just through us, and not bother with MLG at all." But I really wanted to cast the MLG event, because I thought that would be cool. So I was like, "Oh, I really want to cast an MLG." So I did that.
I mean, I think it's definitely a decision worth making. And it was still, I would agree with you. Like, I would really have wanted to cast an MLG as well. But it is kind of funny, like, just to note that there were a decent amount of people I've talked to or been even like involved with that Twitch actually was giving quite a bit of money over many years to StarCraft people and
Mm-hmm.
organizations for a long time, because there was like, I mean, there's still a lot of people who like StarCraft who work at Twitch, so they're always like pushing for it. And then there was, I think, just like, yeah, a lot of that loyalty or just like, yeah, well, you guys were there in the beginning. Like,
StarCraft and Twitch kind of made each other, right? And in a
yeah,
certain sense,
exactly.
yeah, as far as esports
Yeah.
is concerned, yeah.
But it is cool to hear that, like, just like more and more people basically come to me and they're like, yeah, there's a time where Twitch was doing X or Y for us. And I was like, yeah, Twitch actually putting a lot of money to StarCraft too.
Yeah, but at the same time,
Anyways.
I mean, if you trace it back to its roots, without StarCraft, without us, Twitch is nothing.
Yeah.
Because at some point it was owned for League of Legends and StarCraft for Twitch, and that was the fight was owned with League of Legends and StarCraft, or Twitch with StarCraft. So at that point, there's like what, like 5 large streamers. Like, if we stop streaming, Twitch dies. Period. Because
Yeah.
because that's what the platform is. That's what people are there for, is to watch us at that point. So Twitch did reinvest a lot into StarCraft, but honestly, Twitch comes from StarCraft, so they better.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It gets like kind of frustrating when you start talking to people who have forgotten who are never even a part of the roots of esports, and they
Mhm.
they'll him and haw and argue semantics and all that all day about how no, that's not true. But
No, it
yeah,
is.
even a lot of Twitch,
Yeah.
Twitch itself also recognizes it. But anyways, so
A lot of
you
the core Twitch employees come also from StarCraft, from Well Played Agency, which was a StarCraft endeavor. I mean, my contact at Twitch right now, one of the best people that I know at Twitch, is from like ran 6jacks Evoli, for example.
hmm,
I mean, Kevin Lin, the COO that basically built Twitch because it was his product, versus there were 2 products at that point, which was Twitch and another that I don't fucking know the name. No one knows the name because it didn't happen. But one was for sports, and one was for esports. And Kevin Lin's project, the CEO of Twitch, was the esports project, and that was the one that became Twitch.
yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So you got the MLG gig, and I, as I was saying, like, did you do any prep work for it? I mean, did you think this was going to be your door to like being a caster, or was this really just a one-off thing that you're like, no, I'm just gonna have fun and find like a cool experience?
Um, I don't know. Like I prefaced earlier, I usually don't do much planning in advance. I just kind of go with the flow of things, and that's kind of just been my general approach to things. So this was a thing that happened where MLG, when an opportunity showed up, and MLG was like, "Hey, how about you do this?" And I did that, and then I got the gig, and that was cool. I didn't feel like my casting was particularly good or strong, and I feel like a lot of my casting in the earlier days was um, very much from a player perspective that was eager to display my understandings of the game more so than anything else to add to the cast. So um, yeah, I didn't think it was particularly good or fun in retrospect. Um, yeah, I think I was just kind of an analyst for the most part, and yeah, not
Right.
particularly
Yeah.
great with words. Yeah, so I didn't think this is gonna be something or anything like that.
Yeah, you weren't planning on becoming a caster. This wasn't
Yeah.
your way to continue in esports. You had a lot of other things that you were also doing for a long time.
Hmm.
So let's see, after MLG Anaheim, what would have been your next cast? Another Red Bull?
I have no idea. I don't know if there was a next big cast. To be honest,
Yeah,
maybe
I'm
another
not
Red Bull.
sure. You obviously got picked up for Challenger last year.
Yeah.
You did 2 or 3, I believe, and now you've been picked up for the DreamHack cast, which has been
Hmm.
really fun.
Yeah.
So I guess we've kind of done the whole, the timeline of cats, I guess here. So to touch on some like the broader topics that you've already brought up a little bit is that you came in to casting with more of like a pro view, and I got to touch on the whole caster list that you made. That was again something that was
Mm,
controversial, where
yeah.
you didn't mean to come off as a dick, but of course people were like, "Hey, that's not really cool."
The thing is, I don't, a lot of the time, I don't care if I come off as a dick, in so long as I'm saying the things that need to be said from my perspective, if that makes sense.
Which is a very admirable trait in a lot of situations, to be honest. Like, a couple times maybe tact is more, useful. Other times it's like sometimes things just need to be said. Um, yeah, and like I'm definitely the person that can't say the things that need to be said too often, like in extreme scenarios, I suppose. But yeah, I wish I was a little bit more like you. So at the time that you made that, this was, and I'm not sure I'm entirely blowing up in my head, but there was a time where it felt like there was a little more animosity, like not outright like everyone hated each other, but a little more of the calling out casters when they didn't know something, or general mockery of the, like, the caster knowledge back in the middling years of StarCraft II. And it felt like yeah, you were one of those one of those pros who was kind of like, willing to say like, yeah, he doesn't actually know
Hmm.
Protoss or Terran or Zerg or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So when you come here as a pro and you go into casting, I mean, did you quickly learn that there were some other things to be involved, or did you think that it was really important that you push the analysis so that it would become more standard to always think of it as a pro view?
Well, I never, for example, had an issue with Tasteless as a caster, even though Tasteless was never very good as a player or as an analyst from my perspective, right? Like, he did play some StarCraft 2 at the start, and he was good because he was a Brood War player. He was a good Brood War player, that one of the best in the country in the US. So Tasteless is no slouch, and he has a great RTS mind and good at explaining basic concepts. But he's never pretentious about it, and he's never, yeah, exactly that, pretending to know stuff that he doesn't know. From my perspective, that's a great admirable trait of Tasteless that I saw his cast, and it's funny. Like, his best battle cry, my favorite at least, is when he literally yells, "I don't know what's going on," because he doesn't know, and that's great. I think that sincerity translated into his cast, and Artosis could pick it up and actually do good analysis. Whereas there were other casters who would speak in absolutes or talk about things that they didn't know confidently, and that's what really bothered me, because then you're giving out information from my perspective to an audience that doesn't know any better, and they're taking it as gospel when it's wrong, and that's fucked up, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there was a lot more. There was also a bit more of that competition back then, just in the nature of a developing what eventually became esports as we know it, huge, right?
Hmm.
Developing StarCraft II esport, developing esports in general. people were trying to make careers out of this when there was really no precedent for careers. So I think there's a little bit more of that competition, not, not full on backstab, but basically like you didn't want to be the caster who came in as an analyst and then went, oh, I'm not sure. Right. Because that probably didn't seem like it was going to go over well when it came to the next hiring process. So I got to imagine there was a little bit of that. Like it just sounded better to say in absolutes, even if you didn't actually know.
Hmm.
And then I do also imagine there just was misconceptions. That's got to be part of it, right? People thought they knew and then they didn't. Do you
Maybe.
remember any time where you were witnessing a shift in the casters? Was it just a matter of time for people to kind of, I guess, pull back to the, oh, I'm not sure, or I think this is what it is, or was it the matter of getting rid of some casters? Honestly,
Well, I think the list kind of sort of answered that question, right? Because from my perspective, the person that was doing the most harm there was Wolf, and I love Wolf. I think he's a great person, and I love his food tweets. But I didn't think he was very good with the game, um, and people thought otherwise, and that bothered me as a person who thought knew better. Um, and what I did was completely unbiased in that I presented a list of I don't know however many casters it was. I think it was a long like 15 casters or something of the sort.
yeah, yeah,
And then I took the opinions of 20 players, asked for feedback individually, like for all the casters, and asked for them to rank them basically and rate them based on both their knowledge and or expertise and whatever they bring to the table otherwise, right? um and Yeah, and Artosis got number one, I think. Roddy got number two. Tasos got something like number 5 or 6 or something, and Wolf ended up being last and on the players lists. But yeah, I caught a lot of flack for that, even though it should have been apparent that. And again, there was feedback giving. So yeah, my intent was very much to highlight, hey guys, like like you're being fed shit, but also improve. Like
yeah. But
play
I
the
mean, it
game.
is
Yeah.
tricky, right? Because I mean, I guess the argument is that you should have sent this feedback not as a list, in the first place, but also you should have sent it first to the casters themselves. Um, and maybe even with like a warning.
But I think I was doing that actively on my own accord,
Okay.
which was part of why it was perceived as hatred from my end, because I was outspoken about, hey, this is wrong. Hey, don't do this. Hey, that's fucked up. That's kind of
Hmm.
just what I do. If I think something's wrong, I say.
Did you ever have like a sit down with any of the casters, or was it more like
Mm,
based off of tweets and general like
tweets in
being on
general.
shows?
Yeah, being on shows.
Yeah.
Tweets. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that would be the way to go, is like say it first, and then if they continue, like have a serious sit down. But it's difficult because especially if you don't have that, I guess for a lot of them, you probably weren't coming off in good faith if
Mm-hmm.
you ever did ask them,
Yeah.
like, hey, can I sit down? Right? Like they're just like, oh, it's cats.
Yeah.
You didn't have that direct line of conversation. You didn't necessarily hang out with each other a whole lot. That's certainly missing. But it might have been the better way to go, and then come off with it. But I think no matter what, because all these casters are going to have fans, there's always going to be people who just like, yeah, there's no reason to do that. But it was one of the more contentious periods, it felt like, and in part due to the list, that they just felt like casters were still a little like players and casters were a little more like at war with each other. But now it feels like everything's really calmed down. Even if players occasionally get upset, they watch a cast and they're like, hey, you totally miscalled this. It's like pretty much only when they're worse, when they're feeling their lowest, does that actually happen. Or I felt like it was happening a bit more back in the day. um and as I was like kind of gesturing, I suppose, like kind of prodding the conversation that way, it's like, I mean, is this because the casters who were left over, like, I mean, you said Roddy and Artosis and Tasteless all got ranked pretty highly there. Do you think that they really blazed the path to what good casting is in terms of always giving the player the benefit of the doubt and having their intention in mind?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think Dan to this day if he doesn't know something, he'll be like, I don't know, and he'll think about it, and you'll hear that he's thinking about it because he'll go, interesting,
Right.
like, and I enjoy that. Yeah, I think that's fine. So yeah, I think their methods were more sincere, I guess, less pretentious, and yeah, that's hit a better chord with me.
So as you've come in as a pro and now you're a bit more of a caster and an entertainer, you learn that maybe not necessarily 100% analysis is the way to go.
Hmm.
Do you think that it makes the most sense though, today if there was going to be a new commentator coming up, do you think it would make the most sense to bring up a pro who is well spoken? Do you think that that is something that we still need in the sphere of casters?
I think that casters today are much better than they were back then. And part of that is because there's a tried and tested period of like, the community basically vetoing people and like people making their way up to wherever they land. Um, because it's a long period, right? So yeah, I don't know. I've hardly ever hear any commentators like casting a premiere event saying something that's like super off or cringy for me.
Super wrong
Yeah,
and super confident.
yeah, exactly. It's that's
Yeah.
that's rare.
Yeah. I think most of us have learned, over the years to be, there is a certain amount of carefulness with the words, right?
Hmm.
Like, which just makes sense. Sometimes it's a little bit annoying because you're like, for instance, there was recent like discussion and, it was like, I wish that they would stop always highlighting the strengths. Then I wish they would actually show a little bit of the weaknesses of the players. But for the caster, that's always kind of like that's very dangerous because not only are
Mm,
you upsetting their fans and you're also potentially causing strife with this
mm,
player if they go back and watch the VOD, you could be wrong, right? Like they could
sure.
be some other aspects to what you're not seeing.
Mhm.
So I always thought that was kind of annoying because sometimes players do make straight up mistakes.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
Yeah, but I think there's ways to go about it. Like you could say, I would have loved if he did this instead, or something instead of doing, oh, that was wrong. That was the
yeah,
or I would have
yeah.
liked how this other thing unfolds. And then you're suggesting that there's a thing that you think is better without saying what they did is inherently wrong.
I do think you can build up a certain amount of like reputation, I suppose, to eventually bring out the oh no, that was wrong. Like, if you only throw it out once every 100, 200 casts,
Hmm.
then it's usually correct and it usually is something that's pretty bad. So, like Roddy, for instance, I don't think ever really does that, but there's been a couple times I've casted them over the past 5 years. Where he was like, "Oh no, that was just incorrect. Like he missed this thing, or
Hmm.
he didn't put down his Twilight Council, right? Like that was
Yeah.
just a straight up wrong thing."
Yeah.
So,
If there's two
I
cyber cores, it's probably wrong, right?
yeah, exactly. Um, but yeah, I think that's something that we've all learned over the years. I think Roddy was always like particularly good at it. But some of us would go more hardline than softline, and we've all had to kind of learn that. And that's I think helped the player like part of it as well. Now you came in as not just a pro but also a team captain, so you also probably were mindful of when casters are talking about your buddies, and what they were actually interested in. Do you think that it's important to have an open line of communication between casters and players? Should we be talking more with them and getting their insight more? Because, for example, Heroes of the Storm before it, did its thing, they would actually bring in all of the teams the day before rehearsals, so like the Wednesday or whatever,
Mhm.
and they would sit down with the casters and actually talk about the recent metas
That's
and
so
what they were
cool.
bringing to the table. Yeah, exactly. Do you think that that is something that would be like that would really elevate StarCraft II casting, or would just be kind of like
Yeah.
a small improvement?
I think it would be like I think I do this, but it's almost like cheating because I was a pro player. I was a team owner, and so I have a good connection with a lot of the player base, right? And so in that sense, I usually like say, or often I will ask him like a day before the cast, hey, how are you feeling? Like, are you gonna win? Like I'll ask him shit like that. But I think say when live events come back, one thing that I would love to do is for them to schedule breakfasts with a caster that's gonna cast the two players that are gonna play each other or something like that. And that would be super awesome to talk about and have insights and kill time.
So getting a player to come up for breakfast might actually be a little difficult. You try and get to the venue as late as possible. No, but I get your idea. I think one of the other things is that like it's always a little bit weird because we count so much stuff,
Mhm.
right? Like obviously right now with DreamHack, that's an insane amount of hours. But even with offline stuff, we're talking about usually full 10-hour days at least. And the players aren't predetermined either because we're going into a group stage and not a
Mhm.
bracket at first. So it could be really hard to get like, everyone's contacts and then remember what they were talking about. Like I know Fear Dragon actually got kind of like a little bit of crap, in a friendly way, about studying all of the round of 128 players. Like the guys you probably would never see. And that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to be the guy that came in and kind of highlighted, especially the North American players, and it made sense. But yeah, there's a little bit of crap giving. It's like, yeah, you're not going to use any of that. But talking to, I guess the standouts, the guys who are going to be in the X round would be fantastic. As would having everyone come a day early and talk to us about stuff. But
Yeah, that'd be cool.
seems like a dream.
I
Not
don't
really
think
gonna
it's too
happen.
unrealistic, to be honest. Like if you just
You
put it
think?
in the nah, I mean, players are not gonna not go to an event because say it's required for them to go to breakfast to a free breakfast with the casters, right? Like
Yeah. But I
so.
think it's more like they don't want to pay an extra hotel and a hotel night basically I guess was what it would be for a lot of the players
Mm,
to come so much earlier.
well, what about just the day of the tournament, right? They gotta eat breakfast at
Yeah.
some point.
I think if they required it, right? Because it's kind of what it comes
Yeah,
down to a lot of the time, right? If they said, "Hey, do you mind showing your player camera?" Most players go, "Nope."
right.
But if they're
Yeah,
like, "You have to," then they'll be like, "Oh, fine."
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which is been one of the things that we improved on in the season.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think it would be extremely helpful, and it would help get more of their thoughts out. But anyways, the other conversation I want to talk about from a pro player perspective is that idea of how to put it, like pros get so much benefit of the doubt when they come in as commentators. Did you experience a lot of that, or did you think that it was really just the way it should be? For example, at a home story cup cast, a pro could get in the couch and they could go, "This beats that. Oh, this didn't beat that. Okay, well that happens because this guy messed up. Now this definitely beats that.
Mhm.
Okay, well that didn't beat that." So, but usually you know what I mean? Like they're right because it's kind of depending on perfection in StarCraft II, which doesn't actually exist, but they are, occasionally wrong. Do you think that the pro gamers really do come in as the quote unquote best analysts? Or do you think that a lot more credit should be given to the way that you analyze a game? So I guess I'm asking more of like intelligence versus wisdom. Is it important to have all of the intelligence in the world and be able to say this beats that 100%? Or is it important to have that wisdom to be like, well, in case this happens, this is what can happen? The casterism's way of saying it.
Mhm. Um, yeah, it's a difficult question. I think I've never much been too concerned with outside perception, like whether people think what I'm saying is right or wrong. For example, it's not something that I lose sleep over. It's just like if I see something and it makes sense to me, then I'll explain why it makes sense to me. And then if you agree with if the viewer agrees with that and sees my point, and it turns out to be wrong, then they will still have seen what my process was to arrive to that conclusion, so they might be able to see why it went wrong. Is how I would see it. um I am not actively, like, say, concerned with trying to predict what's going to happen in a game too often, unless it makes a lot of sense, or too much sense, or something, something clicks and I'm like, oh shit, like this is going to be super awesome and this is the only thing that I can think it could be, right? But otherwise I'm not like, oh, this is going to happen or that's going to happen. It's more like what has happened or what is happening and why is it happening, and and yeah, get surprised and exciting. So I don't know. I don't ever think about being wrong in that sense. There are there are just different people everywhere, and the same is the case for players. So a lot of players at home story cap, for example, will be much more eloquent or have much better access to their conscious processes, whereas others will be, players that just know, like, for example, the laser, we heard about him in the interview just recently in the I don't know, whenever he last played, and he was saying how in the game he doesn't think about anything. And I've watched matches with a laser where he goes, this game is 100% over. I'm like, it's not 100, there's no chance. And then the opposite result happens, right? And this happens pretty often to people like laser, because I think the way that he approaches the game isn't so much it's more with information, as you were describing. What you were equating to intelligence, I think more like knowledge, like more like a recipe to type of follow. And so he'll be very familiar with that recipe, but not so much with other processes outside of that. So I think there's just all kinds of people, and yeah, I'm not sure if there's like a player type of person that would come in and be more right, or yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. Like for me, for example, I think Wardy has a lot of insights because he watches so very many games that I think he's like more well-rounded than most players, probably, as far as like just overall breadth of possibilities that would emerge from him seeing a situation, just because he's seen it probably, right? Like, so yeah.
Yeah. So you don't give a lot of credit to the people who are like, we need to have more ex-pros.
Well, I think there are very eloquent ex-pros or pros. Like I think Lambo and Hurstam are good examples that get brought up often, of players who are very eloquent, who are very cognizant of the processes that they're undertaking. They are very logical. Lambo is the guy that a laser goes to, and he asks him, how many corruptors should I make? And Lambo will be like, like, I don't know, 12. Like in this situation, it's 12 looks good. And Harstem similarly, like, already does a lot of YouTubing and guides, and he's already pretty good at explaining why the things that he's saying, why he believes in the things that he's saying, or why something would be wrong. So I think they are a brand of player that would enhance a cast pretty consistently on the basis that they know the game well and they know how to explain the game well as well.
So when you come here as a pro and then kind of more as a commentator lately, what were some of the, I guess, growing pains that you felt? You brought up that you were very analytical and maybe like, a little bit boring
Yeah.
because you were so focused on that. What have you changed over the years?
Well, I think the environment never helped me. MLG was a very stressful environment, for example. Like casting with Day 9 for one of my first gigs was very stressful in that sense, because it's like, oh shit, like I'm standing in front of a crowd casting my sensei fucking DRG against the most high player Scarlet in the world. And then it's with the caster, Day 9, and there's a fucking crowd in front of me. And so like that's nerve-wracking, right? And the environment in itself is very structured, and likewise with Challenger, it was a smaller environment, but without a crowd, etc., but also very structured and very rigid, and I don't do well with rigidity, generally speaking. So I think the thing that's helped me evolve the most is how non-rigid the environment that is the current DreamHack is. Yeah, I think the production of the current DreamHack is very free flowy and concern free, and yeah, that I think that's where I thrive.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think that environment has given you, like specifically in your cast? Are you more of a hype guy now, or more play by play, or less concerned about doing the analysis?
I think in life as a human being, I'm a little bit of a chameleon, and I kind of like to adapt to whoever I'm talking to. So I try to recognize that different people are different, and I try to become the best energy that I can for the person that I'm talking with, first and foremost. Um, I guess that would be one of the first things that I've consciously tried to work on. Whereas before I might have been concerned about the analysis and getting out all the information that needs to be gotten out. Now I guess I'm still concerned with that, and I still like doing that because I love the game and what it has to teach. But but I'm also just a little bit more myself, I guess, and a little bit more whatever is lacking. So, for example, with the Muslim, I think I took on pretty much all the play-by-play, even though I wouldn't see myself as a play-by-play commentator, and most of the hype, right? And I imagine I would do something similar with Roddy, whereas not so much with Nate because he's such a great play-by-play person, right? So, yeah, yeah.
That makes sense. I know Artosis is a big fan of kind of just adapting to the person that you're with. Obviously everyone has to an extent, but some people really like flip the switch between certain personality types with other people.
Yeah, I love doing that.
So when you I would say that you are recently a guy who's doing play by play and doing the hype. What if some of the problems that you've learned that you're looking to improve on when it comes to the play by play?
You know, that's super difficult because we get no feedback because there isn't a CatZ out there making like, caster ranking
You're the
lists and
cats
giving
too.
feedback. Yeah, like I get no negative feedback. Like all the Twitch chat is like 95% positive, and then there's like no Reddit thread that says, "Hey, you suck at this," or I even said in a tweet, "Hey, like send me some, throw me some lettuce and tomatoes because I'd really love to learn what to improve on." But it's very difficult to find, I think, that feedback these days. So I don't know. One thing that I did learn, because I am very much for the idea that to be genuinely surprised, you have to not anticipate what's going on. So I've kind of, because if you know what's going on and what what's going to happen, then why would you be surprised? And so I've tried to be more in the moment where I'm not actively controlling my camera. I just let the observer control the camera. So I will be surprised by shit that happens out of nowhere because I'm like, oh, wow, what the fuck? I didn't see that. I didn't see that coming because I'm not actively looking at clicking all the buttons or the product like a player might, or like I might have before. So now it's just like I'm more willing to be surprised because I'm less concerned about say being wrong or just seeming like I know everything or shit like that. And also I think I have a passion for people as individuals, and I love a lot of the people that I'm casting. Like I've known a lot of them for a long time, so I've learned to let my biases shine through in that sense. I've learned to get excited for the players that I want to win, and that'll be genuine excitement that I can conjure because I actually want the player to win. So I'll yell and get excited about it, and then yeah, I guess those are the ways that I'm bringing about hype that I was lacking on before because I was actively concerned with knowing what's going to happen, and I would rarely get surprised by what happens on the screen.
That is a very interesting way to look at it. I think that is unique. I've not heard that before. Less knowledge is better. I mean, in general, we've heard the conversation about Brood War and like not the production tab. So when 20 ultras appear, you're like, what? But generally, when it comes to speaking with people, obviously there is that concern over being known as at least knowing the game, at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
So that's you can the people know, right? Like you there's that balancing act of being like, I want to deliver a good product, and if that kind of makes me come off as a bit of like a fool sometimes because I didn't see 20 lurkers were being built, then fine, but that created hype, so I'm good with that. And also not making the community think that you're just like a doofus that you're just there for only that, right? You do want to kind of like make sure that the community enjoys your, not just your hype, I guess, and whatnot, but also that you've been a part of the community, you know your stuff, and blah blah blah. So it's a balancing act, and one that usually people they are more concerned about getting things right. And I don't think it's wrong at all, but I don't think your approach is necessarily wrong either. But it is definitely very unique. Because one of the things I've always struggled with hyping is that I think that the best hype in play by play is that slow build up that's kind of agreed upon, right? It's the oh my god, things are about to happen, oh my god, they're happening, oh my god, that happened. The little story contained in 10 seconds. But as a hype guy, it becomes so much more difficult because in order to be the most hype, you have to kind of let things go. you kind of have to just let the production tab go and the unit tab go, and you have to watch exactly what's in your face. So I feel like there's a problem where, yeah, a lot of our hype guys, let's talk about Maynard, right? Probably the best hype guy we have, or Tasteless.
Hmm.
They are seen as maybe not, they don't have the analysis tag on them, right? Because
Yeah.
they don't ever usually fill that role. But I always think that Maynard has something to contribute analysis wise. But as a play by play majority, I think it's basically impossible to actually do both. In order to be hype in a play by play, you have to get lost in the scene. And the analysis guy is supposed to look smart because he comes in afterwards and says, this is why that happened. But people often misconstrue that 10-second hype and the mistake of not seeing the banelings coming from the right side, or not seeing the bank is up to 5,000 as not being smart, as not being good at the game.
Mm.
That's what I've always struggled with. And to hear you say, no, I just want to be hype. I want to forget all the other stuff. Is Yeah, again, another admirable quality, I suppose. That is
I do think I have
unique.
stuff to contribute on the analysis front, though. Like, I think I
Oh, of
do
course,
actively.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you're going for the play by play aspect and you're just like completely lost, I would say that most
Yeah.
play by play people would say that part of the difficulty is remembering all of the things that go into it,
Mm.
still having analysis in the back of their mind so they don't look like a complete fool. But you're saying, I don't care if it's in the back of my mind. I want to be hype in this moment. And then afterwards, we can talk about analysis.
Yeah, and I guess I'm just okay with, if there's mistakes or things that I miss. Everyone would make mistakes. Everyone would miss things. I've been playing the game for 20 years. I think I'm pretty smart. So, like, if I fuck up, that's fine. Yeah, and that's part of why DreamHack is so cool too. Right now, the production of DreamHack, because I don't feel like I can fuck up. Because production's always like, oh, you can't fuck up. I'm like, oh, great. I'll just shout out RedBull in a monster stream, and I still didn't fuck up somehow. Like, so yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Yeah. That is it's an incredible take. Yeah, I mean, I certainly you have made your unique impression on the community. There definitely is a lot of positive feedback in Twitch chat and Reddit. So your approach is not wrong. I do think that every new caster, and it's kind of like you're in this weird position where you're not new at all in terms of StarCraft, and you're not even a new caster because you've done stuff in the past. But I guess as a staple caster, you're kind of new,
Hmm.
always appearing on the broadcast.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there's a period where like new commentators kind of get that positive energy thrown their way. And then eventually maybe some of the cracks start to show. People get tired of the what was originally endearing and now
Hmm.
becomes annoying type thing. And that happens to pretty much everyone. So you might get tomatoes and lettuce thrown your way eventually
I hope so. Yeah,
if you keep asking. But
that'd be great.
I think right now you are a very original take on commentating.
Hmm.
But it's a breath of fresh air basically, which is nice. And I was surprised how much I enjoyed commentating with you. It was kind of a question mark, as always is when someone comes in. I think I do a pretty good job with most people. But it's always a question mark. Like, what if we just constantly talk over each other? That's terrible. It's terrible to hear, but you actually have done very well with pretty much all the commentators I've heard you with. So
Thank you.
well
Yeah, I
done.
enjoyed our cast quite a bit
Yeah, well, it helps that we had some really wacky casts.
too.
That ZVZ was kind of silly.
Yeah, I love CBC as well.
Yeah. Um. Actually, kind of on the general subject of getting hired. I mean, did you just get contacted kind of like out of the blue for DreamHack, or was there any lead up to this?
Well, there was Challenger, which was the last thing that had been
Mm-hmm.
happening before that. Challenger, I more like Mark Colberts reached out to me to be an observer for Challenger, but I didn't wanna. So like um, I Awesome Sauce was the person that I recommended to be the observer for Challenger, and then he ended up doing that. And then at some point, I don't know, like I'm just local, so I guess they decided, hey, we need someone for the cast today because someone couldn't make it or something. They brought me in, and then that was basically yeah, how I cast the Challenger, and then that had a good reception, like that was good. And then I pretty much like know everyone in the scene. So when DreamHack comes along, like I messaged Tayoka and I was like, hey, any chance, like I'm going to Dallas anyway. So, like if you want to hire me for casting there, I'd be really happy. And I would love that, and I got good feedback in Challenger, and yeah, it's something that I would have enjoyed. So that's kind of what I said, and then COVID happened, and then they kind of reached out to me. So I wasn't completely out of the blue. I had told them that I had been doing Challenger and I did enjoy it, and if there was a DreamHack Dallas, I'd love to partake. And his answer was like, yeah, I'm not sure, but I guess seeing as COVID happened and there was just more dates to fill, he messaged me and he was like, hey, I'd like to try you for a couple dates. And they basically tried me for a couple dates, and then they kept adding dates. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that yeah, definitely is what I was getting at, because when there was the move over into DreamHack and then to a certain extent ESL, hiring, there was a big question mark for us. We'd always known who exactly to go to. First it was Mark, and then it was Adrian
Harry.
or Carrie, and blah blah blah. But there was a bit of a question mark. Like it was like we're pretty sure that Hyoka was going to make the decision, but like not entirely sure. And all of us pretty much know Hyoka. I think he was
Hmm.
one of the first StarCraft guys I ever met, like back in
Yeah.
like MLG Rally
Yeah,
years
he's
and
been
years
around.
ago. But
Yeah, he's been around since
yeah,
he was one of the original Team Liquid people that would have run the
yeah,
website. So yeah, he was. I known Hayuka for like 15 years or something. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But it can be a question mark, and again, going to your kind of upfront nature. I mean, just going over and asking and telling someone, like, yeah, I'd be interested is always. It's pretty much always the best thing to do as long as you're not obnoxious about it,
Hmm.
which is for some people a fine line that they can't walk. But yeah, just messaging and being like, hey, I'm interested is almost always a good thing to do.
Yeah. I also
So
told them, if you don't hire me for this one, if there's a DreamHack Miami, I would really love to host that in Spanglish, because
uh,
I had just watched the Super Bowl or something.
yeah,
And
yeah. We were talking about that as well in the
Mhm.
during one of the breaks.
Yeah.
Maybe one year. Um oh, so yeah, we're actually headed towards the end of the podcast. So I got one question from a Patreon. A patron. Let me just get to it real quick. Let's guess anything. There we go. So, for cats, what would the StarCraft II event of your wildest dreams be? So I
Mm.
guess Miami, but what else?
It would have to be DreamHack Miami. I don't know. Like the Homestory Cup 20 looked pretty awesome. I don't know if I could imagine anything better. Would have loved to go to that one. Um,
Oh yeah. There was a.
Otherwise, yeah.
I forgot there was a rumor that there was going to be happening. There was basically a confirmed rumor because now I can talk about it because COVID ruined everything anyways. But there was
Mhm.
basically a confirmed rumor that they were going to do one in Canada, I think.
Oh, that would have been cool. Well, they were gonna do one in Vegas, and like for me, I haven't been able to go to Germany because I'm kind of stuck in the US with my visa, because I would have to go to Peru first and then get it stamped there and then come back in the US and then go to Germany. So I passed on all the home story cups. And then they were gonna do it in Vegas, I thought, for the 20th, but then they canceled that, so I was so sad.
Yeah, it turns out that Vegas is like stupidly expensive. Not just expensive, but stupidly expensive.
Yeah.
So I think their plan was to move somewhere else. But yeah, DreamHack Miami would have been cool. Um, anything else about an event that would really shine? I mean, if you had just like oodles of cash,
Hmm,
what would you
I don't know.
add?
It's very difficult. I really enjoyed the early MLGs and the 20th anniversary StarCraft event. It felt like an early MLG basically, just like it was a very small group of friends that were there because like, and it was all the same people that were there before this all exploded, and before it, they're just people who like the game. And yeah, that was pretty cool. Those feels, it's like indie feels almost. Um,
Yeah,
I like that. Yeah,
the
it's more
homegrown.
personable. Yeah.
Yeah, whenever I bring up that question as the guest, there's always a little bit of like, huh, like let me think, because I think what happens is that for a lot of people, there's too many things, and so there's almost like a lock because there's too many choices. Like I always suggest an extra weekend, right? Like an actual full week or 2 weeks of an event. Um, Katowice is awesome because partly because it is a week long.
Mm.
And then I would like to add the analyst segments,
Oh, that'd
like
be
not
cool.
just bring in 6 commentators, but also the seventh and eighth person would be the pretty much pure analyst. Because I do kind of miss those points. Because if we have oodles of cash, we don't need to worry about ad breaks. So
Yeah, I think that was pretty cool. Counter Strike still has analyst segments.
yeah, I mean, pretty much a lot of my dreams are based around watching some of the tier one esports.
Mhm.
CS:GO is doing a lot of things right, and they even just recently announced this whole overhaul, or ESL CS:GO, I should say,
Cool.
for 2021. So Yeah, a little bit of jealousy here and there, but so I just wish that StarCraft II could do all these things. And we would have maybe seen different things happen after like 4 years of pretty standard same WCS stuff if COVID hadn't occurred. I
Yeah,
was really
maybe.
excited to see what DreamHack would have been, but
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking an event, as far as like what I think, what I think would contribute the most to the scene, rather than what I would enjoy the most, I think that Red Bull was doing a lot of stuff right back then. We had for example, I was gonna play Snoot on the main stage, and before we played, they put us in a room with a cameraman asking us questions, and we would just sit next to each other and like banter basically, and then they would show that before the game. I thought that was amazing. I think that's doable if the players are on site, which obviously they would be. Just have a room, a space, and a person that can extract something fun out of the players to say to each other and play that before a match. I think that'd be pretty cool.
people have suggested that a bit for DreamHack online, like getting pre-interviews, but I think pre-interviews are a little bit different from pre-recorded stuff. There's a little more pressure, I think, on the pre-interview going into your match as opposed to something that could be in a room, broadcast later, and edited as well in case you
Yeah,
screw up.
yeah.
So I agree that that would be a cool addition. There's
It
so
would
many
have to be
things that can
live
happen.
almost. Yeah, with the webcams it would look kind of cheap. Like, yeah. But if it
Yeah.
was like a nice environment with good shots and like a production that's not expensive, but it just needs like one cameraman who's an artist at whatever, at cameramanning. And then
Cameramanning, yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, that was the last question then. Not, I actually have a billion, I always do, but got to round it out somewhere. So thank you very much, CatZ, for coming on and talking to me. It's been a pleasure talking to you about the history of esports as well, which I'm sure we could talk, you'd have a lot of things to talk about there, but maybe for another podcast type idea, maybe for a
Sounds
YouTube
good.
video.
Yeah.
Yeah, now's the time to shout out where you've been working and what you're doing and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm trying to get Grandmaster with Protoss on my stream, so twitch.tv/rootcats. And yeah, follow me on Twitter, I guess, @rootcats. And that's it. Thank you very much.
What's your MMR for Protoss right now?
4750?
Okay, cool. Yeah.
What's
I could
yours?
uh 4600, I think.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I recently got to my Terran and I was like, "Oh no." I'm going to start calling myself a Protoss main. It's not quite there yet though. It's not quite there.
Nice.
Anyways, it's been fun. And guys, I hope you enjoyed it. The next episode is going to be with Zeph, so get your questions in if you're a Patreon, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.